Well, welcome everyone to our second Women in VFX Global Panel event. We're so glad you could join us today. And for those who are watching the recording, we hope you can make it next time, and happy holidays, everyone. My name is Shaina, and I'll be the moderator today. I'm a visual effects supervisor, producer, and artist who's worked in LA and New York for the past 20 years on feature film and episodic TV. I now own my own company called Flying Turtle Post, and I teach visual effects and post-production at Syracuse University in upstate New York. So over the pandemic, I was looking for ways to connect with people in my industry and becoming more involved with mentoring. And then I came across the Women in VFX Discord channel, started by Emma, shout out. I found it to be such a unique space for women, not only in visual effects, but in animation and post-production, to come together and discuss issues prevalent in the industry today and feel supported by a global network, and also find new connections to people around the world who are going through similar situations. So again, quick shout out to Emma and the rest of her team who have worked really hard to create a lively community and keep discussions going throughout the almost 2 years that it's been put together. So today our panel topic is managing mental health. So the holidays time that we're going through right now, holidays are for spending time with family and feeling more rejuvenated to start a new year. But in this industry, it's not always easy to do. So we thought it would be a perfect time of year to discuss the topic of mental and physical health and wellness, as well as the stresses, traumas, and triggers that can lead to burnout. Our panelists will offer mechanisms to deal with and promote change within yourself, your department, and your company, along with tips and tools to deal with mental and physical health breakdowns and finding or knowing your own limits. I'll be the moderator for the next hour, and we have a guided discussion with our panelists. Our panelists are a diverse group of women from our Discord channel that are here to discuss mental and physical health from various perspectives. So we have artists, coordinators, people related to HR, and team leaders. And there's also Priscilla, who's here working as tech support. She'll be monitoring the chat throughout, and she'll collect your questions if you want to put them in the chat, and we'll do those at the end. If you want to join the conversation during one of the topics that we're talking with our panelists about, if you can use the raise your hand function, which is, you can find it in reactions at the bottom of your screen. And we will call on you. We'll also record the panel. So for those who can't make it, it'll be up on our YouTube channel. And if there's anything you say about like a company you've worked at or specific people that you regret later and you want me to edit it out before I post it, please let me know. And so you can contact me directly on Discord to edit that out. So let's get started. So for each of our panelists, I'd like you to introduce yourself, and if you can let us know your connection with the topic of mental and physical health and wellness. Claire, if you want to start.
Oh, already can't speak, sorry. So I'm Claire. I live in London. I've lived here for the last 20 years when I moved from Australia. Since then, I've worked in lots of people and talent related roles, starting at the BBC, and then I worked in video games and then visual effects. I took a segue for 4 years I worked for a brewer, which is weird, but I'm now back. And I think, you know, I sort of was attracted to the industry and came back to the industry because of the people, really, for me. And I'm particularly interested in, you know, mental health and well-being, because I think, you know, creating engaged, diverse, happy, healthy teams is kind of, you know, a challenge. And I think that's, you know, one that I'm really passionate about. So yeah, that's me.
Hi everyone, I'm Katharine. I'm UK based. I have been working in the industry for about 13 years now. I started in post-production as a production coordinator, and then I wanted to branch out into the shoot side of things. So then I went into shoot production, did a bit on the agency side, and now I'm currently freelance producing, but I've also set up my own company, Mindful Pictures. And that's very much based around production and mental health, and I'll go into that a bit later in our chat. Really excited to be a panelist today. I feel very passionately when it comes to mental health. I think it's really important to stay open and honest about this subject matter. So I'm excited to share experiences with everyone on the call today.
Hi, I'm Xagoraris. I'm a VFX artist in Toronto, and I primarily do simulations and work with Houdini in my everyday job. I also do blog work and teaching on the side, so I also work as an educator. Mental health is hugely important for me in this industry because when I first got into VFX, I wasn't really in the best state of mind. So I was entering an industry that was requiring like high levels of concentration and stress levels when my stress levels weren't accurate at the time or where they should have been. So learning how to cope with mental health and also watching the other people around me deal with it has been very important to me.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. I live in New York right now, and I'm working as a visual effects coordinator. But before that, I just graduated this past May, but I mostly studied 3D animation and visual effects. So my senior year, I spent studying mental health and how it can be used in virtual reality, which we can get into later. But before that, I started meditation and yoga, I think like 8 or 9 years ago back in high school. So I've been practicing that and incorporating it into visual effects.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So glad you guys are here. I think this will be a great discussion. So before we get into kind of talking about all the different ways to combat these mental health issues and create wellness in our practices, I'd like to start identifying what some of these issues are that are specific to our industry. So Claire, if you want to start us off with that.
Yeah, I suppose this is something that's quite pertinent to me at the moment, and something that I've been working on. But essentially, I think a lot of the time it relies on people being all in and giving everything they've got and going, you know, above and beyond, both, you know, with the work that they do and in a time sense, which I think puts a lot of pressure on people. And it can, you know, there aren't any boundaries. It's kind of you're working ridiculous hours. And I think it's sort of a slightly different conversation between North America and the UK, but at the moment in the UK, a lot of companies are starting to pay overtime. And, you know, I'm a massive firm believer in people getting paid what they're worth and getting paid for the work they do. But I think it sort of worries me that that's just accepting that, that, you know, you can ask people like to get their job done, that they have to work like, you know, 50, 60 hours a week, which, you know, in isolation, maybe if there's context to it, it can be okay. But if that's just a given and that's what's expected of people, it's unsustainable, I think. And, you know, the effects on mental health, relationships, you know, all of so many things are huge. So yeah, that's something that I've been really aware of late. So yeah.
Yeah. Pat?
Yeah, I mean, very similar to what Claire was saying. It's interesting production. It's from the outside, it's a very glamorous industry to get involved in. I remember when I first started, it felt a bit like a private members club I wanted to be part of. And there is that challenge, and it's that competitive working environment in a way you need to prove yourself to be part of this production team. But in reality, it is demanding, like Claire said. You know, you're working these really long hours, these deadlines and turnarounds are just getting harder and harder. Our budgets are tighter, and it's leading to really stressful situations and burnout in, you know, a lot of situations as well, because you're working late, you're not sleeping, you know, you're not having time to yourself, and you're putting work and everyone around you in front of your feelings and your emotions. So for example, for me, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia a couple of years ago, and it's a clear example, you know, of burnout when I see it as, you know, anxiety, depression as your body sending you a message. It's kind of like a friend who's saying, you know, who's knocking on your door and you're not listening, and then they're trying to call you to get your attention to say, look, I'm not happy right now. And then it kind of all goes a bit crazy, and suddenly your body will just kind of go, no, I've had enough. And anyone who suffered with an anxiety attack, you know, or suffering with depression, they'll know what it's like. You feel like you've been hit by a bus. So I'm sure we'll talk about it later, just about coping mechanisms of how we don't quite reach that point. But it's hard, especially when you're working sometimes in a toxic environment. You know, there are these patterns in the workplace which start to emerge. We've got perfectionism, you know, that feeling of needing to be perfect, knowing all these answers and not having to ask anyone for help. Because we don't, in a way, want to look silly. We don't want to say, I don't know the answer to that. And for people to think, oh, right, well, then you're not good enough, which is obviously not the case. Then you kind of get this favoritism, I think, now, where with working late, people who, you know, you're heroed. Oh, well, I've worked over the weekend, or I worked late, you know, this night. And obviously we work late. We do in production. We love it. But it should be the exception. It's not the rule. It's not the expectation. It's not fair. But you know, we have these employees, some of them, some not. And they want to keep things easy and comfortable. And they think by doing that, we're going to be more productive and easier to work with. But then it turns into a bit of a cycle. And, you know, we're not encouraged to be courageous at work and speak up, you know, and that can lead to resentment. You might think, I need a pay rise. I'm working really late. I'm working much harder than I was before, and this wasn't in my contract. We should feel, you know, I am enough, and I do deserve to have a pay rise, and I do deserve to be listened to. I deserve a lunch break. I deserve to finish in time and see my friend today. You know, these things, I think we need to start being more open and having courage to look after ourselves. Similarly, you know, we get into these really stressful environments, you know, with these deadlines, and you get into bad patterns where you have people who think, well, you know, when I was a runner, I had to do all this, so they have to do all this. Or when I was doing that, I wasn't entitled to maternity leave, so why should anybody else? And then we've kind of got this cycle of negativity that it starts to emerge, which in a way we need to start to look at and break down. I think the final thing I would mention as well, which is quite difficult in the industry at the moment, I'm sure a lot of you can really relate to this, especially during lockdown, is it's really difficult when you're always connected. At the moment, how are we meant to focus when you're being contacted on Teams, Slack, WhatsApp, you know, constantly, and people expect an immediate response. They see, we've read it, they expect immediate response. And in reality, any immediate response, especially in a stressful environment, we should at least leave some breathing space to make a decision about what we say back. And it's really overwhelming. And no wonder people are feeling anxious, you know, if you're constantly being contacted. So at some point, we need to maybe take a bit of a break, because the concept of multitasking, if you look back, it's actually a computer terminology, and it described machines in the earlier process of doing two or more jobs at a time. And we are not machines, we're human beings. So I guess my last point would be is just making sure that we take a break and remembering that if you want to switch off your phone and have some space, please do it, because that's really important.
Yep, and just to feed off of Kat's point, like a huge part of what encourages like burnout and degrading our own mental health is just just how studios operate. Because often you'll work at a studio where you're understaffed, so you take on many more shots than you should. Like for example, in the past, like I personally, through my own experience, watched coworkers take on, like, pump through like 300 shots in 10 months because they were so understaffed that there was no one else to do the job. So they would be at their desk working on those shots that they were due tomorrow or due Thursday, and the client really needed them in, and they felt like they were the only person that was worth something to get this job done. And that can just also hurt you in the end too, because after putting in all those hours, putting in all that effort, and you feel like you should be owed something by the studio, and then the studio just says, hey, we don't owe you anything, it's layoff time, bye-bye. That can really have an impact on your mental health, and that often happens. And then there's also the cases of toxic work environments or toxic interviews you might have in the industry, and those can really work the perception of people you might look up to. For example, this is one personal thing that's happened to me. I was in an interview once, and this person was interviewing me. It was a great interview, and up until this point, everything was going smoothly, and there was this pause, and the person interviewing me said, we're not hiring juniors, but if you were a few pounds heavier, you'd fit right in with our VFX team, which was a very awful comment to say. And I came out of that interview feeling like a very terrible and offended person. And lucky for me, I went into another interview, which was absolutely stellar, and everyone on that call was beautiful. And it was one of the best interviews I ever had. So there was like a negative moment, but there was also a positive moment. So trying to recognize both of those and balance those and is really important in this industry as well. So that's kind of something we do need to take into account in the industry. And the best way to kind of walk away from toxic work environments is to figure out how to deal with the stress kind of surrounding that after you leave. So we'll probably talk on more about that later, but that's also a major issue that we need to tackle in this industry.
Yeah, also just going based off of what I've seen, it involves artists and production and just how you might have these schedules. So you'll hire artists for a month or two, and then these schedules are going to get pushed, and then you didn't rebook these artists. So then you're just struggling to find people to work with. And then for the artist side, you might not know where your next job is. So then you're just going to be struggling and stressed out about that. And then production side, sometimes studios just don't want to staff up artists. So then they're always struggling like week by week. Oh, we might have work for this artist, but then we might not. So it's just a struggle knowing next week, either if this artist is going to be here, if we're going to be able to get this work done, or like if we're going to be able to find people, because it's so insanely hard right now to find people that can get the work done and who are available and not booked for the next few months. So that's been a huge struggle recently, I've noticed. And then as someone who just started in this industry, coming into like a coordinator position or even an artist, when I was an artist last year, I've always felt that I need to like step up and make sure I'm like always offering my help, even if I don't know how to do it. So I offer myself and always make sure I'm available to help. And then you might like start taking on more responsibility because you get trust from people and respect, but then you're still like expected to get paid at like this rate, but you're covering for people when they want to take off because they like can trust you to do their job. So it's just definitely a balance of you want to keep doing this job and helping out, but then you also need like to get respect back from your company and make sure that they're treating you well. So there's a huge balance with managing that.
Yeah, I think a couple other things that came up, Claire, I don't know if you want to talk about these too, but when you have changes in your life that change your priorities at work, so sometimes you could have done this kind of I'm all about my work mentality, and then something happens and it completely changes your priorities. So I don't know if you want to talk about that, or isolation in the pandemic.
Yeah, I think yeah, especially like, you know, things that come to mind, like, you know, becoming a parent, bereavements, having to care for, you know, sick family members. And, you know, I think to Rebecca's point about the sort of ambiguity that you have to deal with every day, like to do that, if you're all in an office together, you know, you can kind of get some reassurance from people. But if you're sat at home, not seeing anyone, you sort of spiral a lot more. And I think with the kind of changes in circumstance as well, I think if you've been, you know, the majority of your life is about your job, and a lot of self-worth is wrapped up in that, and then something else takes your attention, you're a different person at work, and that's quite hard. I mean, you know, I think Emma and I have talked about this as well, like, you know, especially when you become a parent, you can't be that same person that you were before. And are people going to, you know, write you off, or, you know, not trust you for something because you're not, you know, all in all the time? So yeah, I think that's a big issue for people.
Great. Yeah, I think we have a ton of things to talk about. So let's dive in. I think one of the first things I want to talk about is something that was just brought up about kind of paying your dues in the industry. So me 20 years in, like when I was starting out, I had to go through these certain things, and then do I expect that of the junior level artists and producers, coordinators that I have working for me? Or how do we start breaking the cycle of paying your dues in the industry when you're kind of starting out and you want to create this new kind of company culture that promotes people and doesn't kind of corner them into these difficult situations, but still makes them feel like they can put their good effort in and still like make an impact on their department. So Rebecca, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, just to start off, last year when I was doing internships before I graduated, I just noticed almost all the internships in LA and New York were unpaid. So that would definitely steer people away from it. And then they wouldn't be left with an opportunity, because you can't be working all these hours and not expect to get paid, especially if you need to pay for your housing or college or anything. So in internships like that, a lot of times people start off unpaid, and maybe eventually they start getting paid. But while you're doing this job, you're learning and you're putting a lot of effort in. You're always making sure that things are getting covered. I know for me, I started off at an unpaid internship, and I would always go around being like, does anyone need help with, like, I learned almost everything, like texturing, roto, paint, 3D stuff. So I was always offering my help. And eventually I was given a project. So I was giving that opportunity to work and get paid and learn a lot more. So I think that was rewarding, that my company did see that I was staying a little bit longer and learning with my team. So that's like a great way that companies can recognize these junior artists and actually like appreciate and give them a chance and let them try it out. If it works, that's like awesome. But for like my coordinating position now, I started off and I didn't really know too much about coordinating. But I would always make sure I would go around doing the small tasks that the producers wouldn't have to do. And then I started getting more responsibility, and I was kind of expected to like cover for people, which is totally fine. But there's always needs to be this communication, I feel like, between everyone, so that no one stays later than they have to, and we can work out these shifts like, oh, I'll stay late this night, and then you'll cover next time we have to stay late. So my company, definitely, we like chat with each other, and we'll figure out beforehand who would stay late that night, and then we'll like catch up in the morning and make sure that everything's going hopefully planned, as long as nothing happens. So I really think communication is great, and it will have people not get angry at each other, especially if someone might leave like at 7 o'clock when the day is done. Someone might leave and not communicate that with someone else, so then they'll just stay after and cover for them. So I definitely think communication is great for breaking this cycle of always like staying after and making sure that people like get what they need by the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's really important because I've worked in a lot of companies that it just becomes getting so negative that just the atmosphere, just everyone's just angrier and angrier about certain little micro things that happen. And then it just becomes, it just builds. And so I think that's attributing to one kind of toxic work environment, that you kind of bring that outside of your workplace into your home. But then there's also other times when you work for either clients or supervisors or your managers that just have no respect for your personal well-being and just keep berating you either verbally or in other ways that make you feel uncomfortable at work. So I don't know, Kate, do you want to talk about any tips for trying to recognize those warning signs and trying to leave those kinds of work environments?
Sure, yeah, let's start with like some red flags, because I think something that I've quickly learned is like how to spot the red flags in the studio, especially if you're in an interview. That can be very hard to see. And I'll use this interview I had as an example. I won't mention any names or studio names, but the interview started out kind of like this, where sit down, you do your regular things. And me being a junior, I didn't understand what red flags were. I just was excited to join this industry because this was something I had worked so hard to achieve. And I finally got my first VFX interview. And so I sit down in the room. I don't know the interviewer personally. I don't know much about the studio. And I'm sitting down and we talk about me, where I would like to go ahead. It seems really formal. And then at the end of the interview, the interviewee is saying, oh, the studio is going to make your reel look amazing. By the end of working with us, your reel is going to be fantastic. You're going to be working on so many cool things. Like, he's very much hyping up the studio. And that can be done in good ways and bad ways. And then at the end of it, there was a moment where he was like, oh, you should feel very proud to work at our studio. We expect only the best from our workers. And like, we're one of the best studios in Toronto. I don't know. But but basically it was very much like a hype train for working at the studio, even though I didn't even get the job yet. So got the job, go to the studio, first day in the office, just waiting for someone to let me in and sit at my desk so I can get started. And I'm so excited and nervous. And the next red flag I noticed was the HR head coordinator pulling me to the side and saying, well, he was the unofficial one. There was no HR at the studio. So that's another red flag. If there's a studio with no HR, get the hell out. You need HR, absolutely. It's a massive thing that's needed in every single studio. And he kind of tells me, he's like, hey, so you're the only girl in this department. Do you want we can sit you away from everyone else? And he's like very much warning me. And so what a wonderful man, still friends with him to this day, but if that's another big warning, if they're already telling me straight off the gate of, hey, would you like to sit somewhere else? Or you're the only female in this department, that's a little bit of a warning sign as well. So noticing red flags like that. Pay attention to what people are telling you before you even get to that studio. Also, it's so important to join VFX communities like this and ask about those studios and see if anybody else has worked there, because that's something also I didn't do as a junior. I just knew the studio had worked on really cool things and I wanted to work there. So I didn't ask anyone about it, which was a huge flaw of mine. So definitely go into communities like this and ask around about it, because if you don't, you might get into a situation that might make you very uncomfortable. And then leaving studios that are toxic, it's very hard because you might think that you didn't achieve anything, or that you were lied to, or you were undervalued, or you were replaceable, or you were only hired to do one thing. And those feelings can last for a very long time. I'm still struggling with them to this day, but a part of dealing with that is talking to people who have gone through similar experiences, or talking to somebody who can calm you down. I have like one of my closest friends in the industry. We had this amazing 2-hour conversation over the phone at 2 a.m. in the morning because I was so upset, and he was also very upset about something else, but in the industry, and we were just talking together about it. And by the end of it, we had both calmed down. We didn't do a big internet rant. We didn't react badly to the situations we were in. So having close connections in the industry and creating those close connections is not only important for networking, but just for you, because they're your safety net by the end of the day. So definitely always communicate what's going on in your life as well. Like, never be afraid to communicate. That's the best thing you can do for yourself as well. And once you recognize all these warning signs, you suddenly realize the healthy environments that you're in. So the studio, for example, I'm working at right now is amazing. I was in a situation 2 weeks ago where I won't go too much detail with it, but long story short, when I was in college, I had a little bit of a stalker, and unfortunately, he's still working in the animation industry. And he left me alone for 2.5 years. I opened up LinkedIn one day at work, and there were messages from him, and I was very, very upset. And my head of department comes over to me and says, "Kate, I'm so sorry. I didn't hand this build off to you." And he stops and he sees that I'm upset, and he says, "Are you okay? Did someone in here hurt you? Like, what's going on?" And he immediately, he was ready to go on the defensive for me, but I said, no, it's nothing here. Everything here is fine. He's like, "Do you need to talk? You can come into my office. We can talk about anything." And he sat me down and we talked about it. And he kind of just looked at me and he said, "Listen, I can't help you because I'm not part of hiring, but I know who you can contact." And he gave me a list of people, and it was the most professional handling of a situation like that I've ever had in the industry. So it's given me a new kind of refound respect for the company I'm working for, knowing that there's people like that to handle bad situations that might happen. So it's always pushing handling those, teaching other people to handle those situations correctly, and also reacting to situations like that correctly. So that's kind of, I guess, the input I have regarding kind of toxic work environments.
Kat was first, and then Claire.
Yeah, just a real quick one. Just in case anyone is suffering at the moment from coming out of a toxic work environment, I just want to say that you're not alone. A lot of people have either experienced it, or they probably will experience it too. So I just want everyone to know that if you are at the moment, you're not alone. And one of the biggest keys for me, recovery in those type of situations, is self-compassion and kindness. And it sounds a bit cliche, but we can be such loving friends and family members, but when it comes to our own struggles, we put ourselves last. And if you think about some of the internal dialogue you have when you come out of a situation like that, and you can come away thinking, "I really don't feel good enough. I've really messed up here. What have I done wrong? Why couldn't I change the situation?" Always remember, if that was a friend, you would not speak to a friend like that. If a friend came around to your house and said, "You're not good enough," you shouldn't have done that. You would tell them to get out your house. So it's really important to be a friend to yourself, and just remember, you're not alone. Be kind to yourself, and show yourself self-compassion, and maybe start by asking yourself questions like, what do I need right now? You know, what would I say to my friend if they were going through a similar situation? You know, these type of questions, you know, what do I see in my future, and lead with kindness and self-compassion.
Yeah, I think to reiterate that point, I think really, if you need to take time, I sort of see people all the time that are like really busy, so they're like, no, I can't take time, and you just have to, like, the world won't end. And I sort of like to play things forward and think about the things in life that I might regret, and it's not going to be like finishing a project, or it's going to be not, you know, to both of your points, like it's going to be that, you know, I didn't take the time or do the things I needed. And also just on a practical point, with, you know, the red flags that Kate was talking about, I think it's also quite useful, like, you know, you think about interviewing the company themselves, talk to your networks, especially, you know, communities like this, and also ask questions about who finances them, who makes the decisions, because you can have a really good HR person, but unless they've got support, and unless they're actually the values of those that actually own the company, it is the difference between people that are really proactive and people who are just firefighting. So I think those were all really good points.
Oh, Kate, do you have follow-up?
Yeah, I was gonna also kind of mention how, like, you can also kind of help create a positive environment in your work. Often, like, per department, there isn't really like events coordinators or people to like coordinate events. And, you know, the more group activities you kind of do as a team outside of work helps develop more personality in your team, because I think a lot of people fall back on to, my life is VFX. I don't do anything but VFX. So creating like activities outside of that creates more personality growth for your entire team. So if you have the energy and you have the ability, definitely like step forward and say, we should celebrate certain things that happen in the office, or say goodbye to people who are leaving, or you know, it's someone's birthday, let's go do a birthday card or a cake or something, right? So it's little things like that will overall improve the mental awareness of the entire studio, because everybody is having a better time away from their computers and has that opportunity to step away and doesn't feel bad about it because everyone else is stepping away. So just little things like that.
Great. I think that leads perfectly into our next topic. So what are companies doing today to create more of a culture that is supportive around mental health and wellness for their employees, and to create these bonds and things like that? So Claire, you see it more on like the larger company perspective, and then Kat, you're more on I build my own company. So I think we'll start with you guys.
Yeah, I think for me, I think it's, you know, things are a bit better in terms of like having the conversation. And I think businesses where at every level, they're bringing it to the conversation, everyone's talking about it all the time, I think is a good first step. And then I think looking at, you know, what you can do to kind of support people in the workplace, not just from a technical point of view, but like, what can you do around like self-awareness? What can you do around resilience? How can you sort of, you know, help people in those ways? And also, I think just not like, it's a reasonably established industry now. So there's a lot of things that are just the way they've always been. And it's kind of like throwing that out the window, which I'm sure that's kind of what you've done with your production company, Kat, but like, you know, and start actually, there's a better way. Other industries are doing lots of interesting things, you know, take from them, just rethink things, because we don't have to just accept the way things are. Because yeah, I think, you know, there's a lot of things that we can learn from the last couple of years with the pandemic as well, although on the whole it's been incredibly stressful and horrible. There are little, you know, silver linings everywhere if we just look for them and try and, you know, implement them in a really nice way. So yeah, that's kind of, I think, what a lot of people are doing at the moment.
Great, thanks, Claire. And in terms of Mindful Pictures, so I set up Mindful Pictures last year with a director friend of mine. We had done quite a few difficult jobs, and we wanted to look at, you know, why are we feeling burnout? Where is this coming from? And if we stay in this industry, how can we change it? So in a way, it was trying to fall in love with the industry again. And we just came together and we thought, right, to continue on, why don't we look at creating this kind and safe space to work in, a really positive environment where we want to feel it, and we want others to feel valued and appreciated when they're working for us. So to build this community and culture of people who really do respect each other and they don't judge each other, because what's so important is whether you are a runner in a company or you are a director, you are equal and you are special and you are important. It doesn't matter your status. That runner could be the next Steven Spielberg. We need to be nurturing people. And for me, what we spoke about earlier about boundaries, time is our most valuable asset. It's funny, it's only when we're given this kind of life or death scenario, or when someone sadly passes away, we suddenly start to think, this is not what I want to be doing with my time, and it shouldn't take that. And it's learning that we are enough. We always have been, and we always will be enough. And sometimes saying no to that company or to that job, it hurts because we don't want to feel rejection. But when you say no to others, you're actually saying yes to yourself. And that is something that we're trying to create here. It's, you know, breaking down these challenges, these boundaries, encouraging people to talk about their vulnerabilities, their mental health. We send out mindful meditations before shoots and anxiety coping techniques so people could feel safer in the work environment. It's making sure that people are given the right time and the resources they need to get a job done, because a lot of the time we're not anymore. We do things like, we have our meetings in nature, we go for long walks to get creative discussions, because how can you be creative if you're working 24/7 and you're not having a break, you know? And yeah, I guess that's the main things that I'll go over to Rebecca. You've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about company culture more, just especially because I have never gone into work, because I've been working from home for the past like 7 months. So I just have noticed that we only get to talk to artists when we have our morning check-ins, which is like maybe a 10-minute to 15-minute meeting. So you never get to know these people better, besides telling them like a deadline or like shots that they need to get done today, or just going over like client notes. So, and then we try to like have these conversations over Zoom, but then everyone ends up just sitting there on the Zoom call, like in that awkward silence where no one wants to talk. So you never get to know these people, especially now because we can't go into the office, or we're always just on Zoom. So then throughout the day, you don't really get to know these artists unless you need to Slack them like, oh, when's this shot gonna like come out? Like, here are more notes or anything. So it's like really hard to get to know people and enjoy your time with them, because if you're in the office, then you'd be sitting in the same room with them and have like some back and forth chit chat. So I think that's definitely something that needs to improve on like the Zoom work from home type thing. And especially if everyone's so busy to get their work out, and we can't have like these happy hours like on Fridays because like we have to meet deadlines and everything, then you especially don't get to meet people then. So I think having a company set aside maybe 30 minutes at the end of the week for artists to actually talk to each other and everyone just to get to know each other would be great. So I think that's definitely something that can be improved.
Yeah, so that takes us into our next topic, which is there's a lot of companies that are still, they don't know how to integrate mental health and wellness into their company culture. So kind of like what Rebecca was just talking about. So how do we, as an individual working at these companies that don't have any standards in place for mental health and wellness accommodations, how do we create our own space and our own change within these companies to help promote this kind of environment that we want to work in and we feel is a positive influence? I know, Claire, you're a consultant for companies, so you kind of are brought in to deal with this. So I don't know if you want to start, or if Kate, you want to start.
Yeah, I suppose if you're, there are some companies who this is kind of at the forefront of what they want to do, which is, where I can help. But I think if you're in a business, like, just keep, having that conversation, go and talk to people, talk to those around you, and start creating those support groups. And I think, again, it's that, if you find that you're in a place where you can't have those conversations and you're feeling isolated, go somewhere else. Like, although, there's a huge amount of, businesses that you can work for that all have quite different cultures, and it's always evolving. So yeah, I suppose from my point of view, if I was someone like that, that's what I would do. But, yeah.
I would also kind of add, just like, also kind of try and generate, if there's no like mental health resources at your company, I would say, create like good connections with your coworkers, because just, let's say if one of them's having a bad day or they broke up with their partner or something like that, their first response might to just narrow down, look directly into their work, and just power through. And that's a really easy tactic to get over pain or anything that's going on in your life, is to just keep working. But that's going to make you burn out faster, and it won't let you mentally deal with the problem that's bugging you either. So if like a coworker confides in you on like an issue like that, definitely say, hey, listen, you can take a day off if you need it. It's okay. You do not need to be afraid that, like, you don't need to explain yourself of why you're taking a day off to HR or the production manager or anything. You just need to say, I'm taking this day off. And if they ask for a reason, you can give another reason if the reason you're taking the day off is too personal. So you can also like bring that up to artists that don't know that, especially juniors who feel like they have to explain everything, or that they owe the company something because it's their first job, they're still excited, or they want to prove themselves, and just help them like set the foundation to not deal with burnout in their future. So teach them how to kind of interact with the studio successfully. Tell them to leave when they don't have overtime, because that was a mistake I had as a junior, where it was, I love this company, I'm going to keep working because I need to prove that I'm a good artist, I need to build up my skills. So I would be there until like 10 p.m. at night until I could take the last train home. And that just took a huge mental toll on me. So if I had someone in the past to say, hey, Kate, go home, just go home, I'm shutting off your computer, go home, that would have been great. But just be that kind of voice of reason in the studio, and just encourage like a healthy work versus home life environment for you and also your surrounding coworkers.
Yeah, I really agree with what you said. But from like a production standpoint, if there's a deadline we're trying to reach, and we notice like an artist is struggling to reach that, or they keep getting notes and it's just not turning out how it is, I've noticed like sometimes supervisors will kind of start to get annoyed with that one person and be like, oh, why aren't they hitting that note? But I think it's just more important to take it from their perspective, because you don't know what their home life is. Like, you don't know like relationship problems, children, like they might have other things going on so that they can't hit that note, or they're struggling mentally with that. So then you shouldn't be taking it out on them until you approach them and be like, hey, do you need help with anything? Do you want us to take you through these notes? Or like they might just have a shot that isn't at their level yet, and they don't want to maybe admit that, like they just need a little bit of like guidance towards it. So I don't think that people should jump to conclusions so quickly, especially if they don't know what's going on in their personal lives. And then Yeah, individually, I think if you don't really feel comfortable reaching out to your coworkers yet, I had this professor a few years ago who made us take 5 minutes before our class started, and he would put on a guided meditation practice, and it was only 5 minutes, but he spent a few years in the industry, and he definitely noticed how it was taking a toll on him. But if he took that 5 minutes before he started work, especially if he knew it was going to be a stressful week, he would like acknowledge what was stressful for him and make sure he was aware of it so that he could put his like effort into fixing it and addressing it. So I definitely think taking 5 minutes out of your day and listening to, I know there's a lot of apps to help people, but you can definitely take 5 minutes and relax and then start your day before getting into the chaos of it.
Yeah, I feel like we could talk about so many of these things all day, but we're getting close to our hour. So I want to kind of conclude with a couple things. So in visual effects, in animation and filmmaking and gaming and all these different things that we have, immersive technology, I feel like we are empowered to create things on our own time or at work that are very conducive to mental health and wellness. So I don't know if anyone wants to talk about work that they've done that kind of helps with either a wellness activity or just kind of like exploring mental health in a certain way. So Rebecca, do you want to start?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier how the last year at school I spent studying virtual reality and how you can use that as a form of meditation and mental health awareness. So I created this environment. Well, I personally love hiking, so I wanted to create this project where I could go into nature and take the time I wanted to observe nature and like all the sounds that are supposed to be really calming, like water, wind, and just take my time and use virtual reality as a space to do that. And throughout that whole time when I was researching, I noticed there weren't a lot of apps on the like Oculus store or anything, especially free apps that would allow someone to go into this space. So I definitely think there's so many opportunities for anyone exploring like virtual reality or 3D to create a space that they can customize to themselves that would provide an environment that is calming. So I definitely was a great time to explore that. And I think it could be really customizable, especially treating people. Maybe if you have a fear of heights and you get anxiety from that, you can use virtual reality to explore that and treat it. So there's definitely options out there to help people.
And then Kate, you kind of go a different way about it in your kind of free time. You do research and write articles about scientific things.
Yeah. So one thing to thanks. So one thing to jump on top of like Rebecca's topic for VR, because that's been a while back I did an article on PTSD that it got some very interesting responses. It was about PTSD and the VFX industry. Half of the people said, VFX is my PTSD. Please, no, thank you. And half of them were like, oh, I didn't know this. This is very fascinating. I never considered that. So it was a very interesting article to write. And a couple things I did talk about in it is that in VR, there's, I think there is a professor who showcased his results at the 2020 Sigograph in Asia. And he works with the director of the University of Southern California and for their medical VR lab. And he created a simulated environment for like Iraqi and Afghanistan soldiers coming back and experience post-traumatic stress disorder. And he's been basically creating controlled environments for them to reenact what their stressful situation is and normalize it enough where they can walk away from it and say, that doesn't scare me anymore. And I don't wake up in the middle of the night and is terrified. And there's also other VR treatments out there called like power dreaming. And it was also developed in California at the Virtual Reality Medical Center in San Diego. And it's mainly for patients suffering from nightmares related to post-traumatic stress disorder or traumatic brain injuries. And they kind of integrate behavioral health sciences and computer technology together. So it's kind of different. It doesn't follow the standard exposure therapy treatments that are out there, but it's something that they are still working with to create a better system to treat people with post-traumatic stress levels. And they're also developing apps for it so the game can be more accessible in its treatment. But when I was also researching this, I found some interesting connections to the VFX industry and burnout, because part of the treatment for PTSD is to literally just do something creative, to paint out your pain or re-experience your pain over and over again. So part of what we do as artists is that every day we're challenged to create something new and exciting and use our creativity. So we're kind of treating ourselves a little bit for post-traumatic stress, but we're also experiencing stress levels like burnout at the same time. So we're forever in this like loop, I guess, or forever in this like gray zone or this cycle, because if you look at it, burnout is a state of emotional and physical and mental exhaustion caused by prolonged stress. So it is a form of PTSD. So treating it the same way can have effective results. So continuing to be creative, continuing to use softwares that make you happy, continuing to make art is a good way to treat it and escape it. And that's kind of what I talk about a little bit in my articles.
Great. So before we do our conclusion, does anyone have any other things that they want to say about either how to, like, tips for coping with these kind of triggers and stresses at work, and trying to like, how do you stay in this industry when you are going to a workplace that makes you, like, your stress levels like increase as soon as you get there, kind of thing, or when you hear your email ding, like what does that do to your anxiety? How do you get over that or move on to something that you're so passionate about doing as a creative industry?
One thing I kind of do when I get to work and I look at my emails, so the shotgun notifications that say 100 new shots notifications. I kind of just call that, because I'm a big Trekkie, what's the damage report? Because that's kind of what it is. So joking about it can definitely help the situation and reduce your stress levels, and just minimizing not getting overwhelmed by the sheer amount of work that's being presented to you. Because by the end of the day, you can only do what you can. And it's not your fault if you're struggling with something, but you do need to ask for help. So I would kind of say one thing that prevents me from getting stressed out at work is I also listen to, this is also weird, but I listen to nail videos. So I have a nail video playing in the back because they're very calming and they're very artistic and they're very slow. So I'll have that in the background. I won't play raging, really loud music, but that also helps calm me down when I'm doing simulation builds.
Cool. Yeah, I think the last thing I want to ask you guys is, what are the resources out there for if you need help with mental health issues? Maybe there's some free resources, or if you want to volunteer in this space. Are any of you in any of those spaces that you want to talk about resources?
Yeah, I volunteer there's a charity called My Black Dog, which is fantastic. It's a free online service where it's for people who suffered with mental health, speaking to other people who also have suffered with mental health. And it's just online. You just tap in and can say, I'm having a really bad day today, this has happened, and there'll be someone on the other end of the line always there to listen to. So like I said earlier, so you know that you're not alone in this situation. So yeah, My Black Dog, it's a really good free mental health awareness tool. There's some really fantastic as well CBT online courses. I think Mind here in the UK do one, and they help with a big one, I think, would be building resilience, dealing with uncertainty in the workplace. Because the reason we really stay late is because we, and we're constantly churning work in and out, is because we want to prove, we don't want to be rejected, we want to be accepted. And actually we need the tools of resilience in place to kind of go, I am enough to say, this is not happening anymore. I'm finishing work at this time. And it doesn't matter what anybody else says, this is what I need to do for me. And until we start to realize we're enough and we have a choice and we don't have to do what we're being told, I think when we get that power back, then we're in a much stronger position.
Yeah, just a small thing to add to that. I think like sometimes don't do work, like, go and, like Rebecca, you talked about like you like hiking, like just make sure you go and do other stuff, because you'll be more creative for it, you'll be happier. Yeah. Yeah, don't work. That's my parting words.
Cool. I also want to say, for those of you in the Visual Effects Society, they just sent out an email the other day that there's the VAS Member Assistance Program, MAP. So it's free and confidential support 24/7. It includes private one-on-one counseling services, and it'll be in your native language. So wherever you are in the world, there's 40+ countries that they support. And they have online resources, webinars, and events. So for anyone in Visual Effects Society, you've got a resource. And then Emma, do you want to talk a little bit about Discord or any other
Hello.
about?
Yeah, for sure. This is always fun to get together, especially as visual effects is such an industry that not many other people know about it. So it's great meeting other people who have been through the post-traumatic stress of being a visual effects artist or producer. But mental health is something that can travel across all industries. So I think the start of making it easier for people coming up the ladder from below us is having these conversations and making these groups like we have with WVFX, and keep on trying new methods of work that change how your mental health is. If it's not working for you and your mental health is going down the drain, try a different way of working. Just like Katharine's been suggesting, and what her company, which is very interesting, is trying to implement and start. And hopefully people who work for Katharine, who have a better sense of mental health and their co-workers, it'll spread like wildfire, and we'll all stop getting to the place, especially during the winter, where we need to have these discussions. Hopefully we'll be talking about better things like moving on with our careers and helping each other grow in that way. But it's beautiful and it's lovely to see us all together. And as always, Shaina, thank you for putting this on. And everyone, please join Discord and carry on the discussion, because we'll be talking further, and everyone here will be available to chat to. And if anyone is struggling with mental health, all of us are always available. One thing is lovely about being online is there's around the clock now 24 hours help. So if you're in Australia and you need to talk to someone, there's someone awake in England that you can have a chat to. So the Discord group is on the flyer, and a lot of people have joined already. So I really hope to see you all there. And thank you to the panelists for sure for giving up your time.
Yes. Does anyone have any questions for the panelists? If not, I will ask if any of our panelists have any final things that they want to say. Okay. Priscilla, did we get all the questions? I think I kind of included some of them in my questions to everyone. Okay. Cool. Well, does any of our panelists have any last words? advice? All right, cool. Well, thank you all again. I know Emma and I are going to be collecting these resources and we'll put it in the Discord channel for the mental health channel for Black Dog and any of the other ones. So Kat, if you had any links or anything that you want us to put in there about how to join, just let us know.
Cool. Yeah, we'll do.
Cool. Well, thank you, everyone. We'll do another one of these in a couple months, and Emma and I will work on the topic. So as always, if you have a topic or you want to be a panelist, please reach out to us and we will get you on the slate. Cool. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Bye, guys.